Well, I've had a few car crashes in my life. And I don't know if you have ever had this experience where you've been hit by another car and you kind of are, you get out of the car, you're kind of woozy for that. And you turn around and you look at your vehicle and you ask yourself this question: I wonder if my car is a write-off. Some of you are asking that question about your relationships. Today on Finding Traction, we're going to talk about some relational tools to help you gauge where your relationship is at and how to make it better. So let's get started.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Welcome back to Finding Traction, and I'm recording this podcast on a morning where I normally am out walking. That's what I usually do. Part of my daily thing is I get out and walk for about an hour and a quarter, an hour and a half, and I'm not walking today because my hip is tremendously sore, and I've been trying to think about where did I hurt my hip so badly. I wasn't wrestling with God all night like Jacob in the Old Testament, and I was trying to think, what did I do? And I finally realized yesterday I moved this big weight machine that my son had left here when he moved out. This bench press, 250, 275 pounds of all these different barbells. And I moved it to another room so I could sell it. And that's the only thing I could think of that caused this extreme pain to be in my body today. So I'm hoping it gets better. So I don't know what that tells about me other than I'm not going to be bench pressing anything like my son did for a long time. So it's good to be here, even though I should be out walking. But let me say, I love connecting with guys. Just a couple quick things. You can email me at bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. Or you can go on my website, bandofbrothers.care. And I coach individual guys. I also coach groups of guys. And one of the things I'm doing right now is I have a Saturday morning group that still has some room for some guys. We meet every 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock, 1 hour, Pacific Standard Time every Saturday morning. So if you're interested in getting a group or you just want to connect with me on a Zoom call and ask me about a group, whatever, please get a hold of me. So let's go on and talk a little bit about just some ideas around your relational status, whether or not you have a situation where you have a car wreck, because most guys that get a hold of me are in some version of getting out of that vehicle after a wreck. They're asking themselves, man, I just don't know if this thing is going to go forward. Will my partner ever fully trust me again? Do I ever have a chance of getting back something that we've lost, or, some sort of relational question. Some of the guys have what I describe it as they've lost the keys to their house. They could be living with their parents or in a basement suite, and the keys that they used to have for their house don't work. So all of those are examples of the implications maybe of our actions, and guys are tremendously motivated to say, how do I begin to understand the damage I've done to my relationship? And more importantly, how do I understand how I can start making things better? I can't guarantee that your marriage will survive, but I at least can make things better. And, that's what we're going to talk about today. I do know a little bit about relationships. Me and my wife have been married 35 years. That's my one and only marriage. I think that's the only one I have in me. We've done premarital counseling for dozens of couples, not only, and done their weddings. We've been to piles of marriage seminars, piles of books. We've been to John Gottman training. I've been trained by Prep. Me and my wife led a marriage course for 15 years that was education around being a better partner. Had hundreds of couples go through it. So I do have more than just a cursory understanding of relationships. And so I take that background and then add it to the background of my own struggles with porn and my own recovery journey and how that's affected my relationship. So maybe that's my vantage point. I just want to be clear up front as into how I'm approaching this. So I'm going to give you 3 possible ways or lenses. Let's use an example of eyeglasses or lenses that your wife, and it could obviously be both ways here. I'm just going to describe it as wives, and assuming it's obviously not always the case that it's the man who is, straying or doing things sexually here. So the first lens that your wife is probably going to perceive your actions as is through the lens of hurt. And this is something that is pretty consistent that I hear from guys, and also I hear from wives as well. You say, well, that's because you're married. That's probably not the case in dating relationships, but that's not even true. And even in non-religious dating relationships, when you go from casual relationships to being in a committed dating relationship and perhaps looking towards formalizing that relationship, there is by and large an understanding in culture that includes not looking at porn. In other words, looking at porn is somehow seen as a violation of a committed relational norm. Now, you might say, well, I don't buy that. Well, if you're in that situation, I'd encourage you to have a candid conversation with your partner then. That may be something you don't want to do. I know that we're deeply committed now, and are you okay with me looking at porn? You might not want to ask that question for obvious reasons because you think what the answer is going to be. You think you know what the answer is going to be coming back. So I think when we move from casual to committed relationships, there is a different understanding, and looking at porn to many women in committed dating relationships is somehow seen as a violation of what it is you've agreed to. Talking about honesty, I had a conversation with a guy recently and I've heard this a few times, and I'm starting to push back now, where they say to me, I struggle with porn, but my wife is tremendously supportive of me. She's a rock star. She's supportive. I couldn't ask for somebody better. She understands. And I hear that, and part of me goes, well, that's wonderful. We'd all love a tremendously supportive wife when it comes to our sexual struggles, wouldn't we? Well, the answer is, of course we would. But here is my concern. Okay, I hear what your wife is saying to you, but have you ever wondered how honest is your wife really being with you? And that kind, what do you mean, is my wife being honest with me? I say, well, you've obviously learned lots of patterns where you haven't been honest with her over the years, but maybe she's not being honest with you. And you go, well, why is that? Why would a wife not be honest with her husband regarding his behaviors, let's say around porn? Well, it could be maybe she has some sort of misguided view around what it means to be a supportive wife. There are certain religious constructs that would I think be unhelpful or unhealthy. She may be operating under one of those. Or maybe she just is afraid that if she was really honest with how she was feeling, then you wouldn't be honest when you were struggling. Because you could now use it against her, where you would say, well, I don't really want to hurt her, so I'm going to hide this from her. And she almost is intuiting that, and she's just going, you know what? It's better for me just to try to play the supportive housewife. So, he was able to ask her, and guess what happened? Lo and behold, he found out that his wife was really hurt when he looked at porn. that she saw it, that it was, why do you need this when you have me? It was a hurtful thing to her. And you go, well, is that good information for him to have? I think it is good information to have. Because now, at least he's operating under the honest truth that his actions are bringing new hurt to his relationship, rather than pretending something like, well, this is not really bothering her. I would go as far as to say, if she's in a hurt posture, that really having intimacy, it's eroding your intimacy, and you're just in one way pretending in your marriage. So let's talk about this area of hurting your wife, because what I'm saying is the very first lens that it's likely. Now, I'm saying there may be situations, but I'm just talking about a likely lens that your wife is going to respond about. Is she is going to perceive this through the lens of hurt. I also want to add to this, and I want to, kick it up a notch to say there is another set of framework along with hurt. It's just really an extension of that is an accurate description of many wives' experiences when it comes to your behavior. And there's a word that we're going to use which goes beyond hurt. And these are the words betrayal and trauma. In fact, those two words are often put together. Betrayal, trauma. Now, I know some of you are thinking, what? I mean, we're not talking Afghanistan or Iraq here. Where does a word like trauma come in? Or PTSD. Now, if you think that those words don't apply here, in many situations, you would be dead wrong. And this doesn't just apply when you say, well, maybe if I physically cheated on my wife, then there would be betrayal. I'm telling you that at an emotional and psychological level, many wives experience betrayal trauma as a result of their husband's behaviors, even including simply them looking at porn on an ongoing basis. There are psychological reactions that women have that can only be understood in a trauma paradigm. And you're not going to get very far in your efforts to heal this relationship if that's going on and you won't acknowledge it. By the way, there are great resources out there that can help you both in terms of your understanding and also getting the support for your wife that she's going to need in the early days after a domestic car crash. By the way, I am talking here about not minimizing what your wife is going through. Again, there's some great resources out there for wives. And I also say to guys, when you can tell that this has caused a real car wreck, in their wife's life as well, I ask them, what is the support that your wife is getting right now? She's going to need support, just like you're getting coaching from me. She is also going to need support. So, the very first lens that your wife's probably going to see your behaviors through is that of hurt and even betrayal trauma. Now, there's a second lens that your wife is probably perhaps going to see through, and that is the lens of relationship concern. Now, frankly, this is actually a more of an encouraging lens, because if your wife is concerned about how your relationship has been impacted, they're now thinking beyond just how they have been impacted. They still care about your relationship. It's a good sign when your wife says she cares about your relationship. It's still important to them. Now, I recognize that your relationship is not your recovery, but the two of them are linked. And it's very likely that your wife is asking and thinking, how does my husband's actions affect the stability of our relationship? How does this affect how he sees me, his commitment to me? And how is this going to change things going forward and our family going forward? You know, one stat that I keep hearing from divorce lawyers, it's out there. It's actually an older stat. I don't know if it's grown since then, but you hear this stat that divorce lawyers, they cite porn as a contributing factor in over 50% of divorces. Now, I say a contributing factor. I'm not saying it's the only factor. But if you're thinking that your porn use doesn't affect your marriage, then you would be painfully naive, according to divorce lawyers. Who is often, I'm going to make a caricature here or generalization, who buys more books on relationships, men or women? The answer would be women. So it is very possible that, and I think in one sense encouraging, that your wife will also put on the lens of concern around your relationship. Now, there's a last lens here that your wife may occasionally put on. It's kind of what you hope for, and you might see if you're willing to allow her to look through the first two lenses. And that is the lens of compassion. Maybe if you show your wife that you were there for her in her hurt and trauma, and that you are willing to work on your relationship, you might even experience this, where your wife sees you with compassion around your sexual struggles. Now, chances are that these struggles were in your place long before she met you. And despite your hope, marriage or your dating relationship haven't magically caused it to go away. You know, dealing with things like porn struggles are hell. And she's experiencing that as hell. But it's also been hell for you as well. And there's times and places where your wife may even be willing or able to put on lenses of compassion towards you. I wouldn't expect it. I certainly wouldn't demand it. But it can be the culmination of allowing your wife to wear the other two sets of glasses and your understanding of how your actions have affected her. Now, I want to turn to this topic of trust because it's one of the most common questions that men ask is this: how will I be able to rebuild trust with my wife? How long will it take? And I want to give you a framework. I want you to, if you have a pen, a piece of paper, I'd love you to draw a pyramid. And in this pyramid, I'd love you to make 5 levels, from the bottom wide level to obviously the top level, which is the smallest level. And this is helpful, and it's going to be called, I actually learned this from a great book called Helping Her Heal by Carol Sheets. This diagram, or this pyramid, is called the Pyramid of Intimacy, and it's going to lay out some of the processes that you're going to need to understand if you're going to turn things around with your partner. So once again, draw a pyramid with 5 levels. At the very top level, I want you to write the word intimacy. Now, notice this is called the intimacy pyramid. It's not called the trust pyramid. I think that's important for this reason. What you're really hoping for is intimacy. Now, some of you go, oh, you mean sex? No. It may include sex, but what I'm really talking about is a sense of closeness. It's a return or a rediscovery of intimacy, a sense of closeness and connection that you've either lost or perhaps you've never even attained in the first place. So at the very top level, you have intimacy. Now, in order for us, as my phone keeps going off here, just ignore that. In order for us to have the opportunity for that intimacy, it has to be nurtured and supported by the level underneath it. Now, the level underneath the top level is the level of vulnerability. When we're truly vulnerable with someone, it leads to a feeling of closeness, intimacy. So underneath intimacy is vulnerability. But most of us go, okay, but that vulnerability needs a level underneath it to nurture it. Under the level of vulnerability is where you add trust. Think about it. We're not able to be vulnerable with someone we have a hard time trusting. So we have 3 levels on our pyramid so far. At the top, we have intimacy. Under that, we have vulnerability. And under that, we have trust. Okay, but what nurtures and supports trust? The answer is under that level is the level of safety. If we don't have a sense of safety with someone, we're not prepared to trust them. So then what is at the very bottom level, the level that's underneath safety? The answer is truth and honesty. Truth and honesty is the very bottom base level. So that is how we begin to rebuild our relationship. We begin with truth and honesty. That begins to build safety. Safety begins to build trust, and so on up to intimacy. Think of it this way. Each deposit into the bank account at a lower level builds the support for the level above it. In the negative way, each withdrawal, like a bank from a lower level, erodes the level above it. So for example, if you're demanding or expecting trust, why don't you trust me yet? It's been 6 months or a year, and you haven't been building on the levels below trust, like truth, honesty, and safety. You are demanding more than your intimacy pyramid is bringing. So, that is just a bit of a broader level as to how you can begin to maybe see your relationship, hopefully, in a more positive light. Next time, what I'm going to do is give you some very specific conversation tools that you can take these concepts and begin to apply them towards stepping and walking up the level of pyramids from the place of honesty and truth to safety. And as my phone goes, we'll sign off from there. See you next time.